Hello everyone. Today's lesson is about relative clauses. Relative clauses are clauses that contain a subject and a verb but start with a relative pronoun. Relative pronouns are used to identify the noun in the main clause. The most frequently used relative pronouns are who, which, or whose. We use who to refer to people. Linda is the woman who owns the grocery. We use which to refer to objects or animals. We are going to the shop which opened last week. Or, the cat which I found is dead. We use whose to show possession. That is the shop whose owner lives upstairs. Relative pronouns can be used to combine two clauses. I prefer ripe fruits. Ripe fruits are sweet. So these two clauses have in common ripe fruits. We can replace ripe fruits in the second clause with the pronoun which, the relative pronoun which, and say, I prefer ripe fruits which are sweet. Second example, I often eat in the restaurant. The restaurant is round the corner. Here again, in both clauses, we have the word the restaurant. So here we can also replace the restaurant with the relative pronoun which and have the following sentence. I often eat in the restaurant which is round the corner. Relative clauses can be split into two categories. We have the defining relative clauses and the non-defining relative clauses. So first of all, let's see the defining relative clauses. So defining relative clauses give us essential and necessary information about the noun it identifies. The relative clause comes immediately after the noun it describes, and there are no commas in the whole sentence. In defining relative clauses, the relative pronoun can be subject in the relative clause or object in the relative clause. When the relative pronoun is subject, the relative clause can come after the subject of the sentence. Let's see this. The people live in Tarahumara. The people are very tough. So these two sentences have in common the people. So we can combine them by replacing the people with the relative pronoun who. So when we say who live in Tarahumara, the relative pronoun who is subject of the relative clause, and it comes immediately after the subject of the whole sentence. The people, subject of the whole sentence, who live in Tarahumara, who is subject of the relative clause, are very tough. So the relative clause here is essential. Without it, we wouldn't know which people we are talking about. Let's have a look at another example where the relative pronoun is subject and the relative clause comes after the subject of the sentence. The boat belongs to my friend. The boat is in Hawaii. So what we have in common here is the boat, so we can combine the two sentences by replacing the boat with the relative pronoun which. So the boat is the subject of the first sentence and the subject in the second sentence. We will have the following sentence. The boat, which belongs to my friend, is in Hawaii. So the boat is the subject of the whole sentence and which is the subject of the relative clause. Here again, the relative clause is essential. Without it, we wouldn't know which boat we are talking about. When the relative pronoun is subject, the relative clause can also come after the object. I have a friend. My friend is an engineer. We can combine the two sentences by replacing my friend with the relative pronoun who and say, I have a friend who is an engineer. But let's have a deeper look. I have a friend. Friend here is the object of the sentence. My friend is an engineer. My friend here is subject of the sentence. Therefore, I have a friend. Friend is object. Who is an engineer? Who is subject of the relative clause. So here again, the relative clause specifies which friend we are talking about. Therefore, we cannot omit the relative clause. I received a gift. The gift costs 200 euros. Combine the two sentences and say, I received a gift that costs 200 euros. I received the gift. Gift here is object of the sentence. That costs 200 euros. Still talking about the gift. So that which replaces the gift is the subject of the relative clause. So as we said, relative pronouns can be objects of the relative clause. We went to the hotel. Lucy recommended the hotel. So we can combine the two sentences because we've got the hotel in common and replace it with which because it's an object, it's not a person, and get the following sentence. We went to the hotel which Lucy recommended. So as you notice, the hotel is the object of the sentence. Therefore, which replaces the hotel is also the object of the relative clause. The plumber broke the pipe. I have just bought the pipe. So here again you could combine the two sentences because we have the pipe in common. You can say the plumber broke the pipe which I have just bought, or the plumber broke the pipe that I have just bought. That can replace who and which. When we say that I have just bought, I is the subject and that, the relative pronoun that, is object. So when the relative pronoun is the object of the sentence, we can drop it and say the plumber broke the pipe I have just bought. Another example, Danielle prepared the cake that you like. Danielle prepared the cake. The cake is object. That you like, you is the subject of the relative clause, whereas that is the object of the relative clause. So we can omit it and have the following sentence. Danielle prepared the cake you like. Here, again, the relative pronoun is optional. Non-defining relative clauses. In these clauses, the relative pronoun that can't be used. The relative pronouns can't be dropped either, but the whole relative clause can be omitted. In non-defining relative clauses, the relative clause gives us extra information. Therefore, it is optional and commas have to be put in the sentence. My neighbor Stephanie, who is very kind, comes from Jamaica. So, who is very kind is the relative clause that we can omit. It's written between two commas. We can say, My neighbor comes from Jamaica. Anna exchanged her t-shirt, which is green, for a new one. Here again, which is green is extra information. We can also say Anna exchanged her t-shirt for a new one. The sentence is meaningful. John, whose leg is broken, was yelling. The fact that his leg is broken is extra information, so we can omit the relative clause and just say John was yelling, because we already know who is John. So in all these examples, we have omitted the relative clause and the sentences are still meaningful.